You're always the embarrassment of this family. That's what my mother snapped at me the night of her birthday party, loud enough for the whole table to hear, as I stood there holding a modestly wrapped gift that apparently wasn't up to her standards. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like that, but it was the first time it truly stuck. I'm Alan, 29, and for as long as I can remember, my relationship with my family has felt like walking through a minefield. One wrong step, one misread tone, and I'm the problem again. I wasn't born into a warm household. My mom, Denise, had a way of masking cruelty behind tradition and appearances. Everything had to look perfect from the outside. Smiling Christmas cards, over-the-top parties, those coordinated outfits during family vacations that made us look like walking catalog ads. But if you were behind the curtain, you'd see that everything was performative. If it didn't serve her image, it didn't matter. Growing up, I learned quickly that love in our house had conditions. Unspoken rules. I was the youngest of three, the only son, and somehow the one who was always falling short. My two older sisters, Marissa and Jenna, were the golden girls. They knew how to play the game. Charm Mom, echo her opinions, fawn over her new haircut like it was a religious experience. Me? I was quieter, more independent, and I asked too many questions. Questions like, why do we spend so much on birthday parties when Dad says we're behind on the mortgage? Or, why does Jenna get a car for graduation when I got a lecture? That kind of logic didn't go over well. I became the difficult one, the moody child, and eventually, as Mom liked to say at parties when she was half a glass deep, our little disappointment. I moved out the week I turned 22. I packed everything I had into a rusty old Corolla and drove 3 hours north to a tiny apartment in a not-so-great neighborhood where I could finally breathe without walking on eggshells. I built a life for myself, slowly, quietly. It wasn't flashy, and it definitely wasn't Mom-approved, but it was mine. I got a job in web development, nothing glamorous, but it paid well enough. I met my now-fiancée, Elise, during a volunteer event she was running for a local animal shelter. She's the kind of person who doesn't need a spotlight because she shines anyway. Kind, grounded, brilliant in the calmest way. My mother never liked her. The first time they met, she gave Elise a once-over and asked, "So what do you do?" "Something artsy." Elise has a degree in nonprofit management. She smiled politely and explained, but Mom didn't really listen. She rarely does. Still, I kept trying. Some part of me always hoped for a turning point. That maybe, one day, she'd see me not as the underachieving son who didn't bring in trophies, but as someone worthy of her respect. Every family event felt like a test. I was doomed to fail. If I brought wine, it wasn't the right kind. If I complimented her outfit, I was being sarcastic. And if I didn't say anything at all, I was cold and ungrateful. Elise, bless her, would squeeze my hand under the table, whisper small jokes in my ear to help me get through the dinners. But it wore me down over time. Then came the birthday party. It was Denise's 60th, which meant she treated it like a coronation. She rented out this overpriced garden venue, complete with string quartets and custom-printed menus. Everything had to be perfect, and she made that very clear in the group text that had over 100 messages about dress code, gift expectations, and who was bringing what. "No cheap gifts this year," she wrote. "It's a milestone." I knew I was already walking into a trap, but I didn't want to add fuel to the fire. Elise and I had recently put a down payment on a small house, and money was tight. I picked out a necklace that I genuinely thought was tasteful. Simple gold, not flashy, but elegant. It reminded me of one Mom used to wear when I was a kid. When I arrived with Elise, dressed to the nines and gift in hand, I barely made it through the front door before I felt it. That tight air of judgment, like a pressure cooker in pearls. Jenna and Marissa were already there, surrounded by people laughing just a little too loudly at whatever they said. Mom spotted me from across the room, gave me that polished smile she reserves for company, and walked over with her champagne glass in hand. "Alan," she said, hugging me with one arm while inspecting the box in my hand. "You're late." "I told Marissa we'd be here by 6:30, I said, already aware that any response would be wrong. She took the box like it was a receipt for a fine she hadn't agreed to pay and unwrapped it right there. Didn't even wait. Her expression shifted. Not dramatic, just subtle enough that I knew. The corners of her mouth tightened. Her nose flared slightly. Elise's hand found mine, fingers gently curling. "This is cute," Mom said. "Is it gold-plated?" "It's gold, I said quietly. It reminded me of the one you used to wear to work when I was a kid. She blinked at me. That was real gold, Alan. Not something from a flea market. There was a pause. One of those thick, sticky silences that coats the room like syrup. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to keep my face from reacting. Then she added it. Casual, dismissive, cruel. You're always the embarrassment of this family. I don't know why I expected anything different. A laugh rippled nearby. Probably someone who didn't know any better, thought it was a joke. But I knew it wasn't. And so did Elise. I looked at her, and her eyes told me everything I needed. We don't have to stay. You don't have to put up with this. So we left. No scene. No shouting. I just turned, took Elise's hand, and walked out of that over-decorated venue with the string quartet still playing in the background. Mom didn't call after me. Nobody did. And that, somehow, was the loudest part of the whole night. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my sister. You could have just smiled and dealt with it for one night. She was really hurt. Hurt. Right. Hurt because I didn't play along with the show. Hurt because I refused to be the prop that made her look like the gracious matriarch with a doting son. That's when the idea started to take root. Not revenge, not at first. Just a desire to start living on my terms, completely. No more half-truths. No more compromises. Elise and I had already been talking about skipping the big wedding. Something small, intimate, maybe even spontaneous. We joked once about eloping to Hawaii. But that morning, as we sipped our coffee and sat in silence, she looked at me and said, let's just do it. Let's stop waiting for them to care. That's when I made the call. And that's where everything really started to spiral. After the birthday party fiasco, you'd think there would be fallout. A phone call, an apology, even a passive-aggressive voicemail. But there was nothing. Just silence from my family, like they were collectively waiting to see if I would come crawling back. I didn't. Elise and I left town 2 days later for a quiet weekend upstate. No phones, no family group texts, no emotional landmines. It was peaceful. We made pancakes in the morning and read books on the porch like the world wasn't burning back home. It was the first time I let myself feel the absence of my family as a relief, not a loss. But of course, the silence didn't last. The first crack came in the form of a Facebook tag. Jenna posted photos from Mom's birthday dinner, group shots, champagne flutes, her holding court at the center of the table like a monarch. The caption? The most beautiful night for the most beautiful soul. Happy 60th, Mom. You deserve the world. I wasn't in a single photo, not even the wide shots. It was like I had never been there. Elise leaned over my shoulder, reading the caption aloud with that dry, sardonic tone she reserved for reality TV and my family's social media. You'd think she gave birth to the Virgin Mary, not a woman who once threw a salad bowl at your dad for buying the wrong brand of croutons. I laughed, but it stung. Not because I wanted to be part of the post, but because the erasure was so pointed, so deliberate. It was a digital reminder that I had failed to perform, and therefore I no longer existed. Over the next few weeks, I kept waiting for some version of reconciliation, maybe even a confrontation. But instead, what I got was avoidance. The family group chat, which had been mildly active before, suddenly exploded with wedding planning talk, but not mine. Jenna had decided to renew her vows with her husband for their 5th anniversary, and Mom was treating it like the royal wedding. There were spreadsheets, vendor mood boards, a dress-fitting Zoom call that I was accidentally left out of. Marissa texted me once with, "You're being dramatic. Just call her." I typed and deleted a reply at least 10 times before I settled on, "I don't think you understand what it's like to be treated like a PR problem in your own family." And then came the phone call. It was Elise's idea to invite a few close friends over for dinner and tell them we were planning to elope. No big announcement, just a quiet celebration. We cooked, popped a bottle of cheap champagne, and made a little toast. That's when my phone started buzzing. First Jenna, then Marissa, then, finally, Mom. I let it ring. Then came the message. "Alan, I just saw your little dinner party announcement on Elise's friend's story. You're eloping? Without telling your family? Without letting me help plan? I gave birth to you. Do you have any idea how selfish this makes you look? No congratulations. No, I'm happy for you. Just outraged that she wasn't the one holding the clipboard and color palette." I didn't respond. I turned off my phone that night, and for once, slept deeply. Elise and I flew to Hawaii a week later. Just the two of us. A rented beach house, a simple ceremony barefoot in the sand, and a little dinner at a food truck court where we danced under string lights to a Bluetooth speaker. It was everything our families weren't. Easy, joyful, real. We took Polaroids instead of hiring a photographer. I wrote my vows in a spiral notebook. Elise cried when I read them. I did too. And for the first time, I felt like I was enough. Not the golden child. Not the disappointment. Just Alan. Her husband. We didn't post anything online. Not yet. We weren't trying to hide it. We just didn't want it tainted. But secrets, even innocent ones, don't stay hidden forever. 2 months after we got back, Elise posted a single photo. Us at the ceremony, laughing with lace around our necks and sand on our feet. The caption was simple, best decision of my life. The likes started rolling in. Friends commented. Old coworkers. Even my college roommate. And then my mother saw it. I got the call at 6:17 in the morning. You got married and didn't tell me. No greeting. Just that flat, seething tone she saved for betrayal. I was half asleep, groggy from a late-night coding session, and for a second, I thought I was dreaming. I said. Elise and I got married. It was beautiful. There was a pause. A long one. You robbed me. That word. Robbed. Like I had stolen a family heirloom, not made a personal decision about my own wedding. You took that from me, Alan. You took my right to plan, to be part of the most important day of your life. No, Mom, I said, sitting up, my voice still calm. I took it back. You made it about you. You always do. Click. That was it. She hung up. And from that moment on, it was open season. I started hearing from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunt Linda called to say she was disappointed that I hadn't included the family. My cousin Troy sent a 3-paragraph message about how family is everything and how I should have at least invited Mom. The kicker? He didn't even invite me to his wedding last summer because we weren't close enough. But Mom didn't stop at guilt trips. She started a narrative. On Facebook. In church. At brunches. Alan got married in secret because he's ashamed of us. He didn't want his family involved. I didn't even get to meet Elise's parents. She had. Briefly. And made sure to ask them how much money they made. The real tipping point happened during Marissa's baby shower. Elise and I had been hesitant to go. The tension had only gotten worse, and I wasn't sure I could stomach another family event where I was treated like the delinquent cousin in a Hallmark movie. But Elise, ever the peacemaker, suggested we go, just to show we weren't avoiding them. So we did. Big mistake. The moment we walked in, it was like a vacuum sucked the air out of the room. Conversations paused. Eyes darted. I felt like we'd walked into an intervention. Mom greeted us with a tight smile and said, "Oh, you made it. Thought you were too busy not inviting people to major life events." I forced a laugh. Elise squeezed my hand. We sat. We mingled. Or tried to. But the snide comments didn't stop. Jenna joked loudly that she hoped her kids wouldn't elope and post about it online like a YouTuber. Someone asked Elise, "Was it a shotgun wedding?" Marissa pulled me aside and said, "You could have told her. You know how she is. Why do you keep poking the bear?" "I didn't poke anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending." That's when Mom made her grand move. During the gift opening segment, after Marissa unwrapped some hideous crocheted baby booties, Mom stood up and tapped her glass with a spoon. "I just want to say something," she announced. The room quieted. "I raised 3 children," she said, voice trembling just enough to draw sympathy. "And I always try to be there for them. Every birthday, every achievement, every important moment. But sometimes, one of them forgets what it means to have a mother who cares." People shifted. Eyed me. Elise's hand went stiff. He got married without me. In Hawaii. Without even a phone call. And now, he acts like I'm the villain. I didn't move. I didn't speak. My face was stone. But inside, something snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly and permanently, like a bone setting in a new place after a fracture. I stood up. I walked out. Elise followed. Neither of us said a word until we were in the car. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered. She looked at me. "Then don't." And that's when the plan started to form, not out of anger, but out of clarity. I was done playing the role they assigned me, done being the scapegoat for their dysfunction. And if they thought eloping was selfish, they hadn't seen anything yet. After that baby shower, I stopped trying. That may sound defeatist, but it wasn't. It was clarity. For the first time in my life, I truly understood that no amount of explaining, no amount of effort, No amount of bending over backwards was going to make my family see me for who I was. Not unless I stayed in the box they built for me. And that box, it was tight. It was airless. It was filled with expectations I never agreed to. I didn't go no contact. Not right away. But I went quiet. I muted the family group chat. I archived my sister's messages. I let calls go to voicemail and stopped justifying why I didn't pick up. At first, there was noise. Mom called 3 times in 1 week. Jenna sent a voice note that was basically just a guilt trip with jazz hands. You're not just punishing her, Alan. You're punishing all of us. But then, the silence returned. A deeper, colder one. The kind that made you feel like a ghost in your own bloodline. Elise stood by me through all of it, but even that started to weigh on me. Not because she ever made me feel like a burden, far from it, but because I knew she hadn't signed up for this level of tension. When we got married, we thought we were starting a life, not entering a war of attrition with a matriarch who believed she'd been robbed of her throne. And then came the final kick to the ribs. It started innocently enough. Elise's parents were planning a small barbecue and invited us to join. I hadn't seen them much since the wedding, mostly due to distance, but they'd always been kind to me, supportive in ways I wasn't used to. They respected boundaries. They asked about my work, not to judge it, but because they were genuinely curious. I was looking forward to it, until I found out my mother had called them. Somehow, she'd found Elise's mom's number. I still don't know how, but she called her. And what did she say? She told my mom she was concerned. Elise said to me that night, face pale, that you've been acting out of character. That she was worried you were pulling away from family because of outside influences. Outside influences, I repeated. My voice was steady, but my jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. Like you're some kind of puppet master? She implied that I manipulated you into the elopement. That I isolated you. She called me calculating. That word. It hung in the air like smoke. Elise had never once raised her voice to my mother. Had never confronted her. Had never been anything but gracious, even when she had every right to walk out. And this was the thanks she got. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about my childhood, about the way my mother had used love like a leash, about how I'd learned to anticipate her moods like weather patterns, calm one moment, thunderous the next, and how I'd carried that hypervigilance into adulthood like a second skin. I was tired, not just of her, but of myself, of who I became around her, of the quiet, obedient version of Alan that kept showing up hoping this time would be different, hoping I would be enough. That was the fall, the quiet kind. No big breakdown, just a slow unraveling of illusions I didn't realize I was still holding on to. I started therapy 3 days later. It had been on my mind for months, but I always found reasons to put it off. Money, time, pride. But Elise helped me find a local clinic that worked on a sliding scale, and I booked the appointment before I could talk myself out of it. My therapist's name was Raj. He was calm, gentle. He didn't ask too much at first. Just let me talk. I remember the first thing I said. I think my family doesn't love me unless I'm doing something for them. He nodded. And what happens when you stop doing those things? They disappear, I said. Or they punish me. We unpacked that sentence for 3 weeks. And slowly, painfully, I began to see it for what it was, a pattern. One I'd been stuck in for so long that I thought it was just life. I realized that my mother didn't hate me, but she didn't see me either. She saw a role, a disappointment, a reflection of her own fears. And no matter how hard I tried, I was never going to be able to perform my way into her love. That understanding didn't make it hurt less, but it made it make sense. Meanwhile, life outside that emotional excavation started to change, too. My work, something I'd always been decent at but never truly invested in, became my outlet. I threw myself into it, not to escape, but to build. I started freelancing on the side, picking up web development projects that challenged me in new ways. I rebuilt my portfolio from scratch, cleaned up my GitHub, and started getting offers from clients I'd never dreamed would find me. I stopped asking for validation from people who never offered it freely. Instead, I started creating my own scoreboard. And then, something strange happened. I got noticed. One of the freelance projects I'd worked on, a sleek, user-friendly interface for a startup app that helped small businesses track inventory, got featured on a popular tech blog. The article mentioned my name. I didn't think much of it until my inbox exploded with inquiries. Suddenly, I was being offered remote contracts. Good ones. 6-month retainers. Creative freedom. I took one with a company in Portland that gave me full control of their UI redesign, and when it launched, their user engagement jumped by 40% in the first month. They sent me a bonus, a big one. And for the first time in my adult life, I wasn't just stable. I was thriving. Elise saw it before I did. The way I carried myself started to change. I stopped apologizing for my opinions. I stopped second-guessing myself before speaking. I no longer braced for judgment when I brought something to the table. I just spoke, and she'd smile at me across the kitchen island with this look, part pride, part relief, like she'd known this version of me was there all along. We started looking at houses again. The one we were renting was fine, but now we could afford more. Not just financially, but emotionally. We didn't need to tiptoe anymore. I wanted a place that felt like a home we built, not just one we borrowed. We found it in a quiet suburb about 20 minutes from the city. Nothing fancy, just a two-story with a wraparound porch and a backyard that Elise immediately envisioned turning into a vegetable garden. I put down the offer the day after our third visit. No hesitation. And when the offer was accepted, I didn't tell my family. Not out of spite, not out of secrecy, but because it wasn't their milestone to hijack. Elise and I celebrated quietly. We popped champagne in the empty living room, dancing on the hardwood floors with no furniture in sight. She played some corny playlist on her phone, and I twirled her around like we were in a rom-com. It was stupid. It was perfect. A week later, I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. It was from Mom. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with my name written in blue ink. Inside was a folded note, handwritten. Not cursive, just her usual precise, controlled script. Dear Alan, it began. I saw your name in that article. Congratulations. I suppose you're too busy now to call your mother. That was the tone. The whole letter. It was 2 pages long. A mix of passive compliments and veiled criticism. Praise for my work, laced with bitterness that I hadn't shared the news with her directly. Comments about Elise being quietly influential. A closing line that read, "You've clearly decided to live your life without us. I only hope you don't regret shutting out your family when you finally realize how alone success can be." I stared at that line for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and slid it into the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't respond. Not then. Maybe not ever. Because what she didn't realize was that I wasn't alone. I had Elise. I had a life I built from ashes. I had peace. And slowly, I was beginning to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not the kind you wear like a badge, but the kind that sits quietly in your chest and reminds you that you didn't give up. That you found a way through the wreckage. I was rising. And soon, they'd see it. They just wouldn't be part of it. There's a strange kind of calm that comes after you've let something break completely. A silence that doesn't ache anymore. It just is. That's what life became after I put my mother's letter away without responding. No fights. No yelling. Just distance. The kind of distance I once feared, but now clung to like oxygen. The house Elise and I bought started to feel like a real home by spring. She planted tomatoes, cucumbers, even strawberries in raised beds in the backyard. I built her a greenhouse from a kit that arrived in 17 confusing boxes. It took 2 weekends and a lot of swearing under my breath. But when she stepped inside and squealed at the tiny sproutlings taking root, that moment made every blister worth it. Work was thriving too. My side freelance business had grown into something more. More clients, more referrals, and slowly, more vision. I wasn't just coding anymore. I was advising, leading, building systems from scratch. I even started mentoring a few younger developers who'd found me through LinkedIn. I liked helping them. I liked seeing someone light up when they finally understood a piece of logic that had been tripping them up. Life was good, but something still hung in the background. It wasn't bitterness. Not exactly. It was more like a score left unsettled. A chapter one hadn't finished writing. Not because I needed revenge to move on, but because they had never been held accountable. Not once. I kept thinking about that letter. You've clearly decided to live your life without us. I only hope you don't regret shutting out your family when you finally realize how alone success can be. It wasn't just the condescension. It was the nerve of it. That after everything, after the way she'd spoken to Elise, after the birthday party, the baby shower speech, the smear campaign she ran behind our backs, she still positioned herself as the victim, like I had abandoned her. That line echoed in my head for days. I'd be watering the plants or sketching out a new app design and suddenly hear it in my mother's clipped, rehearsed voice. When Elise noticed my silence one night, she asked if I wanted to talk. I hesitated. Then I told her everything. My urge not to strike back in anger, but to correct the record. To make sure the version of the story she was spreading didn't become the permanent one. Elise listened, nodded, and asked a single question. What would holding her accountable actually look like? That was the moment the plan started forming, not out of pettiness, but out of something sharper, colder, more precise. I didn't want to scream at her. I didn't want to write a scathing email or stand up at Thanksgiving dinner and make some viral speech. I wanted something undeniable, uneditable, something that made them squirm, not because I said something mean, but because I said something true. I didn't want revenge that was loud. I wanted it to be elegant. So I started with information. Over the next few weeks, I quietly reached out to people in the extended family, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, second uncles, people who had drifted to the periphery. Some of them had already distanced themselves from Mom, too. Others were surprised to hear from me. But once I explained, they opened up. One conversation with my cousin Darren, who'd moved out of state after high school, was especially illuminating. You know, she tried to talk my mom out of inviting you to their anniversary party, right? He said, his voice low. What? I blinked. When? Last year. Said you were going through something, and it would be too awkward if you showed up. She made it sound like you'd had a breakdown or something. That landed like a punch. I hadn't even known about the party. She said I had a breakdown? I asked slowly. She didn't say it outright, but you know how she talks. Implying things. Dropping little poison breadcrumbs until people start assuming the worst. It all made sense now. The coldness from some relatives. The surprised faces when I mentioned the elopement like it was no big deal. The pitying tones. She hadn't just iced me out, she'd rewritten me. And people had believed it. For months. I got off the call with Darren and sat in silence for almost an hour. Then I opened my laptop. I created a folder and named it The Record. Inside, I began compiling everything. Photos from the wedding, voicemails, screenshots of texts, especially the ones Elise had gotten from my sisters, passive-aggressive jabs about being influential and secretive. Elise was hesitant about saving those, but I reassured her. We're not publishing this, I said. We're documenting it. For us. For truth. I wrote a long personal statement. Not for social media. Not yet. Just for myself. I titled it What Actually Happened. It took me a full week to finish. It wasn't a rant. It was clear. Measured. It walked through the events, the dynamics, the erasure. I included anecdotes, things they'd said to me growing up, moments they'd mocked Elise, dismissed my work, weaponized guilt. I even quoted the letter my mom sent me, ending with that final line about how success would be lonely. Then, I sent it to someone I trusted, my former professor from university, Dr. Keene. He'd always believed in me, even when I barely believed in myself. We'd stayed in touch over the years, and he'd followed my career with quiet pride. He called me the next day. This is powerful, he said. Are you planning to share this publicly? I don't know yet, I said. Maybe, maybe not. Either way, he said, you've found your voice. That's the hardest part. That phrase stuck with me. Found your voice. For so long, my voice had been wrapped around theirs. I didn't speak. I reacted. I didn't explain. I defended. I didn't live. I performed. But now I was writing the narrative. And once you start doing that, you start seeing other opportunities. That's when the timing got interesting. Around the same time, I was contacted by a podcast I'd listened to for years, one about work, growth, and family dynamics in high-achieving households. Apparently, one of the hosts had seen my featured article in the tech blog, followed me online, and reached out to see if I'd be willing to come on to talk about success after dysfunction. The phrase made me pause. Success after dysfunction. Not in spite of it. Not buried beneath it. After. I agreed. The recording was scheduled for mid-June. I didn't tell anyone. Not Elise. Not friends. I wanted to do it alone. The host, a kind woman named Samira, asked thoughtful questions. Not tabloid-why. Not dramatic. Just honest. What did it feel like to realize your family didn't really know you? I thought about that for a long second before answering. Like walking out of a house you thought was yours and realizing it never had your name on the deed. We talked about boundaries. About love that comes with conditions. About how easy it is to lose yourself when the people closest to you insist on defining you for you. The episode aired quietly. No clickbait title. Just episode 83, Redefining Home. I didn't share it online. Not yet. But I sent it to my sisters. And my mom. No subject line. No message. Just the link. I didn't expect a reply. But I got one. Not from them. From others. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of emails. DMs, LinkedIn messages. People I hadn't heard from in years reaching out to say they heard the episode. That they saw themselves in it. That it made them cry. That it gave them hope. And somewhere in that cascade of responses was a message from Aunt Linda. I had no idea, it read. I'm sorry, Alan. Truly. I should have asked more questions instead of assuming. Your mother made it sound like you just drifted away. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I sent her the document I'd written. What actually happened? Within 2 hours, she wrote back. I believe you. That was the moment the plan shifted. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about witnesses. About people seeing the truth, even if the ones who caused the damage refused to admit it. And the more people I showed, the more the narrative cracked. Elise helped me redesign the record into a password-protected microsite, one I could share with select people. Not to air dirty laundry, but to reclaim the story. The homepage was a single sentence. This is what actually happened, in my own words, without interruption. The rest? Well, let's just say the stage was finally set. The beauty of quiet revenge is that it doesn't require shouting. It doesn't demand center stage. It just happens. Slowly. Organically. Like gravity pulling the truth back into place. After Elise and I finished the microsite, the digital home for my story, we didn't rush to share it. I was selective. Intentional. Every time I sent it, I thought hard about the person on the receiving end. Were they part of the smear campaign? Did they believe Mom's narrative without ever hearing mine? Or were they just orbiting the drama in silence, too unsure or too polite to ask? The first group I sent it to was the extended family. Aunt Linda, Uncle Bruce, my cousin Darren again, a handful of others who had distanced themselves from me quietly after the elopement but were now beginning to ask questions. The podcast episode had stirred something. People were curious, but more importantly, they were listening. The responses trickled in, each one more validating than the last. I had no idea this was going on behind the scenes. Thank you for sharing your truth. It was brave. I feel like I owe you an apology. I believe the version I was fed. No dramatics. No performative apologies. Just honest, human acknowledgement. The kind that had been absent my entire life. And then, the real opportunity arrived. Jenna was planning a massive anniversary party for her 5th year of marriage. The one Mom had insisted on co-hosting, treating it like her personal PR comeback. It was to be held at the same garden venue as her 60th birthday, with a catered dinner, professional photographer, live band. Basically a rerun of the night, she humiliated me over a necklace and called me the embarrassment of the family. Aunt Linda, who'd become something of an ally since reading my letter, casually forwarded me the group email invite. Figured you wouldn't get one directly, she wrote. But I thought you might want to see it. Sure enough, my name wasn't on the guest list. Not even as an optional +1. Elise wasn't surprised. Same script, new act, she said. But I wasn't angry. I was focused. Because that party? That was the perfect opportunity to pull the curtain all the way back. And the timing couldn't have been better. 2 weeks before the party, I was invited to speak on a panel at a well-known tech conference in the city. The topic was Narratives in Leadership, how your personal story can shape your leadership style. My portion wasn't just about code or startups. It was about resilience, rebuilding, boundaries, finding your voice in environments that silence you. The conference filmed everything. High-quality footage, edited, captioned, and posted to their YouTube channel with my name and title in bold letters. The video took off. It wasn't viral in the TikTok sense, but in the professional world, it gained serious traction. Recruiters shared it. HR directors bookmarked it. I received 5 new client inquiries within 48 hours. And alongside that came comments. Real people resonating with what I said about navigating toxic family dynamics while trying to grow into your own. I took that video, and I embedded it on the homepage of the microsite. Below it, I added a new section. The truth, in context. If you're here because you were told I abandoned my family, this is what actually happened. Unfiltered, unedited, and backed by the receipts. Underneath that, a button, read the full story. Then I created a new mailing list. Just one email. One link. No message. No commentary. And I sent it. Not just to the extended family this time. To everyone. Old neighbors. Church friends. Family acquaintances who used to host us during holidays. My mom's friends from the garden club. Even the pastor from the church she'd been bragging to for years about her gifted son who lost his way. I didn't do it anonymously. I signed it. Alan Parker. Son. Husband. Builder. Not your scapegoat. Then I turned off my phone. The party was that weekend. I didn't go, but my letter did. Linda told me later that several guests showed up already having seen the microsite. A few had even printed pieces of it. One woman apparently walked up to my mother and said, "So this is the garden where you called your son an embarrassment. It's prettier than I imagined." Mom was blindsided. She didn't yell. She didn't throw a fit. She just went pale. Like the structure she had spent decades building had suddenly developed cracks she couldn't plaster over. Jenna tried to do damage control, claimed it was all taken out of context. But the problem with that defense is that context was exactly what the microsite provided. Dozens of screenshots, dates, quotes, messages, audio. It wasn't an attack. It was a record. And you can't argue with a record. Later that night, I got a call from Marissa. I hadn't heard her voice in over 6 months. "You made Mom cry," she said flatly. "Did she cry when she called my wife manipulative?" Silence. "She's devastated," Marissa added after a pause. "She says you turned everyone against her." "I didn't turn anyone," I said. "I just let people see what she's always hidden. If that feels like betrayal, maybe that's because she built her reputation on a lie." "I just wish you'd handled it differently," she said, tone brittle. "I handled it quietly. With facts. You all just never expected me to say anything." She didn't reply. She hung up. Over the next few weeks, things changed. The flood of messages slowed. But the impact remained. People started coming to me for the truth. I got emails from distant relatives asking to reconnect. Former mentors sent messages of support. Even Elise's parents, who had been caught in the crossfire of Mom's manipulations, thanked me for standing up, not just for myself, but for Elise too. Elise and I continued building our life, but now with something new in our foundation, closure. I no longer felt the need to prove anything, to defend, to explain. And then, finally, the last domino fell. I received a handwritten letter from my mother. The envelope was cream again, but the handwriting was shakier. It wasn't long, barely half a page. It didn't say, "I'm sorry," but it said this: "You were right. I didn't see you. I saw the version of you I wanted, and I punished you when you refused to be him. I don't know how to undo that, but I read every word, and I can't say you were wrong. Mom." I folded the letter slowly, placed it in the same drawer as the first one she sent. Then I closed the drawer, not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined me. In the months that followed, the silence from my family became permanent. No more guilt texts. No more performative invites. Just peace. Elise and I celebrated our 2nd anniversary with a small backyard dinner under fairy lights. A couple friends, some wine, and laughter that didn't feel borrowed or fragile. We were whole, not because we burned bridges, but because we chose to stop crossing the ones that always led to pain. My family had built a house of mirrors, but I built a home of my own. And in the end, I didn't need them to admit defeat, because the truth stood taller than their silence ever could. The day I stopped waiting for their love was the day I finally made room for my own.